Hi, I'm Maggie Hamilton. I graduated from Morristown High School in 2018. The fall following graduation, I went to Spain for 9 months, taking a gap year. After I came home from Spain, I went to community college for 3 semesters at RCBC, and this spring I will be transferring to Cornell University to study international agriculture and rural development. Right now, I'm still in Morristown. I am waiting to move to school in the spring. And while I've been home, I've been babysitting and working at the Cubbyhole on Main Street while I go to school. So, a fun fact about myself is that I've had 7 knee surgeries. Not really that fun, but hey. So, I'm going to spend the majority of my time speaking on my gap year because I feel like this is probably the most unique part about my progression postgraduate. So I knew that I wanted to take a gap year probably at the end of sophomore year of high school. I had met somebody who had taken one, and I had no idea that that was an option until I met this person. And they were speaking on their time, and they had spent their time traveling through a bunch of countries doing volunteer work. They had done it through an organization that basically charters out your gap year. You pay them a bunch of money and they kind of plan it all out for you, where you're going to stay, where you're going to go, all of that. And for a while I thought that I wanted to do it that way. And then I realized how much money it cost, and it's almost as expensive as going to like an out-of-state 4-year university. So I quickly realized that wasn't going to be how I was going to spend my gap year. And so just through talking to people that had traveled on a budget, I had learned about something called like a work exchange, and so that's how I ended up spending the whole entire first half of my gap year, was doing work exchanges. So a work exchange is basically you do a set amount of hours in various types of jobs, and in exchange for your work they give you a place to stay and food. So you're not spending any money to live, but you're also not making money, but they're not paying you, that whole thing. So it's super beneficial if you're somebody who's young and you don't have to really worry about money. You just need to live. So that's what I had planned to do when I got there, just because being an 18-year-old fresh out of high school, you don't have that much money saved up. I actually decided to spend more time at home than I originally expected post-grad. All my friends left for school in late August. I didn't go to Spain until the end of October because I needed to save more money. I got a job at Strive at the Field House, and I was a PTA there for a bunch of months before I could go where I felt like financially secure to be able to spend time there. So once I felt good about that, I figured out what I wanted to do. There's an organization called WOOF. It's WWOOF. It stands for Worldwide Opportunities for Organic Farming. And so it's basically just what it sounds like. You volunteer on these small organic farms. And so that's what I did for the first 3-ish months of my time in Spain, was volunteer on these small organic farms, which was incredible because coming from, suburban area, New Jersey, I had no experience with farming, and what it takes to make a farm organic. And I learned so much about that and so much just about Spain in general. You get a different experience when you come alongside somebody from a different country and you start working with them and living with them, as opposed to just being an outsider. You get to see a really unique perspective of a country. And so that was one of my main goals for my gap year, was to have a really authentic experience. It's not often that you get a whole entire block of time from 9 to 12 months to spend anywhere you want. And so it was really important to me that I would pick one place and I would stay there, because I wanted to be able to get to know one place really deeply instead of a bunch of places only shallowly. So that's how I landed on that. I landed on Spain specifically because I wanted to improve my Spanish. I got to like Spanish 3 in high school and then stopped, and my Spanish was not great. So it was important for me to go to a place that spoke the language, but also wasn't going to be an issue at my deficit of my language that I had at the time. So Spain was the perfect balance because it's in Europe and a decent amount of people were still speaking English there. So I felt safe enough where it wasn't going to be an issue if I couldn't speak Spanish fluently. So that's how I landed on Spain, because I was an 18-year-old girl traveling alone to a foreign country, and you have to be really smart about where you go and what you're doing. So that's how I landed on Spain. And then I woofed as a verb, for the first decent portion of my gap year. And then since I had spent so much time volunteering, I actually had a decent amount of money that I hadn't tapped into. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to enroll myself in a Spanish school because I was frustrated with the level of Spanish that I was learning. So I went down to the south of Spain and I enrolled myself in the school, and I did that for 5 weeks, which was super, super awesome and helpful. One, just to like really work on the nitty gritty of the language, but also people were filtering in from all over the world. So it was a super international community, people from Australia, China, Canada, South America that were not really South America because they already speak Spanish, but people from all over. And yeah, it was just awesome. It felt probably like the closest to what a traditional like American study abroad experience would be, where like during the weekends, me and my friends would travel to different cities in Spain to explore them, and then go to school during the weeks. So that was incredible. And then after that, there was some bucket list places I had wanted to go to. So I went to Paris for a week alone. I took a 14-hour overnight bus to get there. Talk about budget. And I spent 7 days in Paris just going through the museums and exploring the city. And then after that, I went to Portugal alone for a week, which was also incredible, super beautiful, a really underrated country, also super affordable. And then after I did that, I spent a whole month hiking the Camino de Santiago, which is basically a pilgrimage that dates back to medieval times. Legend has it that the remains of one of the disciples of Jesus are in Santiago de Compostela, which is the city in northwest Spain. And so people would take this pilgrimage. It used to be a religious thing, but now it's just, something that people do when they kind of need a break or a breath or need to recenter or something. So people from all over the world come to Spain to take this pilgrimage. And so there are a bunch of different routes you can take that come from different cities, but all end up at the same city, Santiago de Compostela. So the one that I did was across the northern coast of Spain. It was about 520 miles. It took me 29 days. That was an experience of a lifetime, and I cannot wait to go back and do something similar again. Also, super international crowd, meeting people from all different walks of life who had been led there for so many different reasons. And then I went home a couple of days after I finished my hike. So that was, the progression of my gap year. You could spend a gap year doing so many different things depending on what your interests are or what you'd like to try out. You can make a gap year super affordable. If I spent my whole entire time volunteering, I probably could have finished the whole year like sub $2,000. So it's really, really manageable if you want to be able to do it. Yeah, I would really recommend. That's what I felt like I wanted to do after school, because I wasn't really convinced that I had to go to school right after doing so much school. American culture tells us that we have to go to the schools so we can get the jobs, so we can make the money. Everybody knows that whole rat race type of thing. I wasn't really convinced by that, so I knew that I wanted to take some time. And I'm really happy that I did, because now I actually have found my interest and hopeful career path from my gap year. I knew nothing about farming or agriculture before I went, but now I'm going to study it. So it's really eye-opening, and it just is what felt right for me after high school. Everybody is entitled to whatever you want after school, and I think it's super cool that most of us have the outright choice to go about it in our own way. Yeah, I could talk about my gap year forever, but after I came home from my gap year, I went to community college at RCBC for 2 semesters. I wanted to transfer this past spring into this fall, but COVID hit, so I was like, it doesn't really make sense for me to go away. So I banged out so many general education requirements at RCBC, and now as me going in as a second semester sophomore transfer student at Cornell, I have almost all of those classes done. They're over with. I got them at a super affordable rate at RCBC, and now when I go to Cornell, I can take my course like specific classes that are unique to the program that I'm in. So community college I could also talk about for a really long time about why it's super beneficial and more people should look at it as a really serious option. The school is great. They're connected with Rowan. You can basically get a 4-year degree through RCBC and then Rowan at a really, really great price. They have programs in nursing, psychology, bio, all these things. So I would check them out, especially now with COVID, school being weird. You might not get the experience out of school that you had planned for. So I would take those options really seriously, because you can do that for a year or two and then go wherever you want or stay there and get it done there. There are really, really great options that I think people should look into more. So yeah, I went to RCBC for 3 semesters, and that was great. I was able to basically work a full-time job while I was doing that, save up a ton of money so that I could go away to school. I babysat for a while, basically was a nanny, and then I was also working at the Cubbyhole on Main Street. So that was super great too. I think I grew up in a way that I wouldn't have if I just went straight to school. Like I said, everybody has a different path. I also think too, for community college, some people get out of high school and you're just really not ready to go to a 4-year university, and a lot of personal growth happens when you go to community college. It's just super practical, and you kind of just get a more, I feel like, real life perspective on like what is to come. And nobody really holds your hand, which is good in my personal opinion, because you kind of have to be self-motivated, which is what the real world is like. So yeah, I would recommend a gap year, would recommend community college. Now I'm going to a school who has the perfect program for me. So your path doesn't have to be linear. I know coming from Morristown, it's like go to school, go to school, go to school. And I get that, and it's so good for so many people. But I think for a lot of people, it can be really discouraging, and you get yourself involved in something that you weren't really equipped for. So I just would really encourage people to try and strip away all the influences that are kind of carving out our paths for us, and just see what's really good for you personally. It's really tough and a tall task to be able to do that, but I think it's really important. And yeah, just like do whatever the next thing is for you that feels right, that you have peace about, because if you're off in that way, things are just not gonna work out as you would have hoped they would. So yeah, my lasting advice honestly is really just to do a little bit of soul searching and see what makes the most sense for you. Like I said, like my path has been pretty circuitous, a gap year, community college, now a 4-year university for only the last couple years. So, and I will be graduating with the class of 2019 from college, which doesn't really matter. It's just 1 year. So there's no rush, and your path can look different from what your friends are doing, and that can be okay. So I just encourage anybody who's like, I don't really know what I want to do, to just take your time and look at your options, and don't rush yourself into anything that you don't feel super confident about. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm sure maybe they'll drop our emails or something, but definitely I would love to speak to anybody who has any questions on a gap year, community college, what that whole thing looks like. Yeah, and like something that I wish I knew when I was in high school would basically be what I just said, was that like your path doesn't have to look like what everybody else's looks like, and it can be 100% effective and productive and what you needed as an individual. So yeah, you have options is basically what I'm getting at. Thanks. Bye.